Greetings, brave content explorer. Are you watching from a quiet mountain hut or a buzzing city with too many pigeons? Declare your coordinates in the comments. And if you've got friends or family with spare attention spans, send this their way too. We begin. Elliot Langford stood before the towering windows of his Manhattan penthouse, the city stretching below him like a field of scattered stars. Behind him, the living room radiated deliberate elegance. Pale leather sofas arranged with geometric precision, modern art in bold strokes hung on the walls, and a pristine glass coffee table layered with oversized photography books. Two golden retrievers dozed on the heated marble floor, their tails thumping lazily in half-sleep. The scene could have graced the glossy pages of a luxury magazine. Rowan would have joked about it being staged perfection. To anyone watching from the outside, he and Camille seemed to embody the ideal life. At 35, Elliot had already carved a name for himself at one of New York's premier architecture firms, his first boutique hotel project securing his rising reputation. Camille, on the other hand, was a celebrated fashion photographer, her work regularly appearing in Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. Their social media told the same polished story: intimate dinner parties bathed in candlelight, trips to far-flung destinations, candid photos with their dogs, always smiling, always radiant. Their friends called them the golden couple, as if fortune itself hovered over their shoulders. Yet as Elliot caught his own reflection in the glass, a tall man with storm-gray eyes and a beard trimmed to precision, a quiet restlessness gnawed at him. Just hours before, they had uploaded a photo of themselves on the balcony, the Hudson River behind them aflame with orange light, Camille's head resting on his shoulder. They looked blissfully unburdened. The reality felt nothing like that image. A faint click jolted him, the unmistakable sound of a shutter. He turned and found Camille holding one of her vintage film cameras, stealing a candid shot of the room. She often did this, capturing fragments of life without warning or ceremony. Tonight, she wore comfort instead of couture. Black leggings, his old college t-shirt, hair knotted into a loose bun. There had been a time when her spontaneity thrilled him. Now it unsettled him in ways he couldn't name. "What are you working on?" he asked, forcing a casual tone into his voice. Camille glanced up, momentarily startled. "Trying out a new film stock," she said quickly, eyes flicking back to the camera. A brief, fleeting smile crossed her face before she lowered the camera into her lap. Elliot stepped away from the window, crossing the room toward her. The dog stirred but didn't rise. "Another batch? Didn't you just order film last week?" "It's for that personal series I mentioned," she answered, slipping the camera into its worn leather satchel. "I want to capture intimate moments here at home, everyday things people overlook." "Sounds interesting," Elliot murmured, though even he heard the hollowness in his voice. Lately, Camille had thrown herself into countless personal projects, each vaguely defined, none of them ever reaching completion. Everyday intimacy. The words felt bitter on his tongue. Intimacy between them had been missing for months. He sank onto the sofa and patted the cushion beside him. "Come sit with me for a while?" Camille hesitated, then perched at the far end of the couch. Moose, the older retriever, immediately nudged her knee, earning a distracted scratch behind the ears. Elliot draped an arm across the back of the couch, gently urging her closer until her shoulder touched his. Her body remained stiff. Silence stretched between them. On most evenings, they would laugh about their days, swap stories about impossible deadlines or something ridiculous the dogs had done. Tonight, only the muffled hum of traffic 30 stories below filled the air. "You were quiet at dinner," Elliot said softly, finally breaking the silence. "Something wrong?" Camille's hand stilled on the dog's head. "Oh, no, just tired," she murmured. He nodded slowly. "You've been pushing yourself non-stop, and with Milan coming up—" His voice trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken. She was leaving for Italy in a week for a major shoot, a trip she had mentioned only in passing. "I'll be fine," Camille replied quietly. "It's just a lot right now." She gave a quick smile meant to reassure him, though it never reached her eyes. Elliot studied her profile. High cheekbones, eyes the warm color of amber, summer still clinging faintly to her skin. Even exhausted, she glowed. But behind that beauty lay a distance he couldn't bridge. She stared ahead, detached, as if lost somewhere far beyond the room. "Maybe after Milan," Elliot said carefully. "We could get away for a weekend. The lake house, just us and the dogs. No distractions." Camille's jaw tightened, barely noticeable but enough for him to catch. "Maybe," she replied, her tone neither agreeing nor refusing. "Hard to plan. Things will be chaotic after Milan, too." Tokyo was next on her itinerary. Elliot swallowed the sigh, threatening to escape. Lately, it seemed Camille was always packing, always vanishing toward some distant city. "Yeah," he said quietly, voice meant to soothe though it trembled. "We'll figure things out. When it slows down." His hand landed briefly on her shoulder, habitual, careful. Camille slipped forward, leaving the touch behind. "I think I'll shower and call it an early night." A familiar ache tightened in Elliot's chest. He forced a small, rehearsed smile. "Sure, I'll be there soon." She leaned in for a quick kiss against his cheek. Cool, obligatory, gone before it even registered. "Good night, Elliot." "Night," he murmured. He stood in the quiet as she disappeared down the hall. The bedroom door clicked shut. Water began to hum faintly through the pipes a moment later. Moose, sprawled at his feet, gave a soft whine and nosed his knee. Elliot let out a dry chuckle and rubbed the retriever's head. "Guess it's you and me, buddy." Dottie waddled over, resting her chin across his foot in silent comfort. Leaning back, Elliot tried to pinpoint when the shift in Camille began. It had crept in slowly, an absent glint in her eyes, laughter that didn't reach him, long evenings absorbed in her phone, errands that took her away without explanation. To everyone else, they still looked charmed, the couple people envied at dinner parties. But behind their closed door, something essential had vanished. Intimacy, honesty, trust. He couldn't name it exactly, only feel the hollow left behind. He reached for his phone on the coffee table and thumbed through recent photos. There they were, just last weekend, hosting friends on the rooftop. Camille laughing as he flipped burgers, another shot of her sneaking steak scraps to the dogs with a mischievous wink at the camera. On screen, they looked flawless. Some days, Elliot almost believed it himself. But nights like this, when silence built an invisible wall between them despite sharing the same room, the doubts gnawed louder. Camille was drifting somewhere he couldn't follow, and she wasn't saying why. With a heavy exhale, Elliot set the phone aside and pressed his palms over his eyes. Maybe he was imagining it. Camille had always been mercurial, an artist's temperament, sudden creative highs, abrupt retreats, unpredictable bursts of focus. He'd weathered them before. If she was exhausted or under pressure, maybe this was simply her way of coping. "It's temporary," he told himself. "She's busy. I'm busy. When the travel slows down, we'll find our rhythm again." He rose to tidy the living room before bed. That's when his gaze snagged on her camera bag by the sofa. A glossy travel magazine jutted from the side pocket, its cover washed in the golden skyline of Milan at dusk. Another city, another stretch of distance. He drew a slow breath. He was proud of her. He always had been. Supporting her career came naturally, just as she'd once supported his. Plenty of couples managed demanding work and time apart. Surely they could too, couldn't they? Still, as he switched off the lights and drifted toward the guest room, where he'd been sleeping more often than he cared to admit, a quiet dread settled in. On the surface, their life gleamed. Perfect, enviable, untouchable. But hairline fractures ran beneath the shine. And if they kept spreading, there might come a point where neither of them could mend what broke. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dark. Camille's schedule only grew more chaotic after that uneasy night. Within a week, she was flying to Milan for a major fashion shoot. The evening before her flight, Elliot helped her pack, folding delicate dresses, sliding camera lenses into padded slots, while Moose and Dottie hovered anxiously nearby. Camille moved briskly around the room, ticking items off her mental list, her energy taut and wired. "You'll text me when you land?" Elliot asked, tucking a pair of boots into the suitcase's side pocket. "Of course," she said distractedly, untangling a nest of charging cables. "I'll be swamped, but I'll check in." Elliot stepped behind her, looping his arms around her waist. "I'm proud of you. Milan Fashion Week. It's huge." She softened just slightly in his hold. "Thanks," she murmured. "I just wish it wasn't all happening at once. I feel like I'm never home anymore." He pressed a kiss into her hair, breathing in the jasmine of her shampoo. "When you're back, let me take care of you. Candlelight dinner at Trattoria Luisa? Or I can even attempt that carbonara you love." Camille turned toward him, this smile warmer, genuine. "It's a date," she promised. For a heartbeat, the distance between them eased. She rose on her toes and kissed him. And for that fragile moment, Elliot let himself hope. The fleeting moment dissolved almost as quickly as it had appeared. A sharp buzz from Camille's phone shattered the hush, vibrating against the nightstand. She eased herself from Elliot's embrace, twisting toward the glow of the screen. "That's probably my Uber," she murmured, already swiping to check. By the time dawn crept over the city, Elliot stood curbside in the pale gray chill, his arms wrapped tightly around her. The town car idled nearby, engine humming low against the quiet morning. A faint mist clung to the streetlights. Camille held him close once more before stepping back. "Safe flight," he whispered, forcing calm into his tone. "It's only a week," she promised, smiling with practiced reassurance. "I'll call when I can, okay? And kiss the dogs for me." She waved one last time before climbing into the car. Elliot remained on the sidewalk, motionless, watching the retreating red tail lights until they melted into darkness. Inside, the apartment felt unnervingly hollow. Their golden retrievers padded behind him, noses pressed to the door, confused by her sudden absence. "I miss her too," Elliot murmured, crouching to rub their ears. The unease crept in quietly, but it stayed. He'd seen her leave for assignments countless times, yet this goodbye felt heavier, somehow final in ways he couldn't name. When Camille landed in Milan, her messages were scattered and brief. Safe, insane schedule. XOXO. Then 2 days of silence. When Elliot finally caught her on a video call, it was midnight in New York, morning in Italy. Her image flickered, grainy across the screen. She stood outside a cafe, golden sunlight spilling across cobblestones behind her. "Hey you," she greeted brightly, though faint shadows bruised the skin beneath her eyes. Street noise buzzed faintly through the weak connection. "Finally," Elliot exhaled with relief, grinning. "I was about to file a missing persons report. Figured Milan had stolen you." Camille laughed softly, tired but genuine, lifting a tiny espresso toward the camera. "Close call, but I'm surviving on caffeine. This shoot's been brutal." Beneath her playful words, Elliot caught the fatigue. "I bet the photos are stunning," he said gently. "But how are you holding up?" "Oh, you know, adrenaline and coffee." She brushed stray hair from her face. Someone off-screen called her name in rapid Italian, male voice. A flicker of unease stirred in him, but Camille only tossed back, "Uno momento, per favore," before refocusing on the camera. "Sorry, driver's here, heading to day 3 of the shoot." "Don't let me keep you," Elliot said. "I'm just glad I got to see you." "Me too." Her expression softened. "How's everything there? The dogs behaving? You holding up okay?" "We're fine," he replied. "Work's busy. I tried making carbonara the other night." He forced a laugh. "Not nearly as good as yours, but edible." Her lips curved into the first real smile he'd seen in weeks. "When I get home, we'll have a cook-off. God, I miss real food." Before he could answer, the voice in the background called again, more insistent. Camille winced. "I've got to go. They're waiting." "Knock 'em dead," Elliot murmured. "Love you." "Love you too," she replied automatically, but her eyes drifted elsewhere as the words left her mouth. The screen went black. Elliot set the phone down, that unfamiliar hollowness gnawing at him. The call had been fine, even sweet, yet something in her love you had felt off, practiced, hollow. And who was calling for her? Just a driver, she'd said. He tried to silence the thought. She was working. It was unfair to expect long, lingering calls when she was halfway across the world. Camille returned from Milan 3 days later, bone-tired but triumphant. That night, over a glass of wine, she rattled off hand-picked stories, temperamental models, breathtaking backdrops, a comic mishap with a shipment of gowns. She scrolled through preview shots on her tablet, ethereal couture framed by the Duomo glowing at sunset. For the first time in weeks, she looked alive again, her exhaustion eclipsed by professional exhilaration. Elliot soaked in her smile, daring to hope this was the shift they needed. But the reprieve didn't last. 4 days after she landed, Camille dropped the next bombshell. Tokyo. A last-minute magazine cover shoot. Tokyo? Already? Elliot kept his voice even, collecting dinner plates as she spoke. Camille exhaled softly, crossing her arms as if bracing herself. I know, she said quietly, almost to herself. I didn't expect this either. My agent woke me up in a panic this morning. Apparently, the original photographer fell ill at the last moment. Vogue Japan asked for me personally to fill in. Her gaze flicked upward to meet his. This could change everything for me. He tried to smile, but it felt forced, his chest heavy with unspoken doubts. That's incredible, he murmured. They wouldn't call you unless they knew you were the best. He gathered their empty plates, carrying them to the sink. The clatter of ceramic against porcelain was louder than the silence hanging between them. After a pause, he said quietly, It's just, we've barely seen each other since Milan. She stepped up behind him, slipping her arms around his waist as the faucet hissed. I swear after this shoot I'll slow down. I'll turn down the next offer. Maybe we vanish for a while. Head to the lake house. Go completely off the grid for a week. Elliot turned toward her, the water still running behind him. Her eyes were steady but pleading. All right, he whispered. I'll hold you to that. Camille gave him a faint, tired smile and kissed him suddenly, urgent, almost desperate. He kissed her back, wet hands sliding across her back. For the first time in weeks, a fragile spark of hope flickered inside him. If she truly meant her promise, maybe they'd find their way back. That night, they curled into each other's arms, closer than they had been in what felt like ages. Camille drifted into sleep almost instantly, exhaustion etched into every breath. Elliot lay awake, listening to her slow rhythm and the soft snore of Dottie on the rug. A thought he didn't want to admit gnawed at him. I'm losing her. He forced it away, focusing instead on her warmth against him, convincing himself things might finally be turning around. 2 days later, she was gone again, this time to the other side of the world. Elliot buried himself in work, using early mornings and late nights to drown out the silence of the apartment. Their connection was fleeting, fragmented. A selfie arrived from Shibuya Crossing, Camille grinning under neon lights, peace sign raised, captioned, Wish you were here. The next day, a short email, exhausted, crashed early, XO. The 14-hour time difference made real conversations nearly impossible. And when they did manage a call, her voice sounded distant, frayed at the edges, always interrupted by someone knocking on her door or calling her to another shoot. The night before her return, Elliot lay in bed staring at the ceiling. It was well past 1 in the morning. By now, her plane would be somewhere over the Pacific, due to land at dawn. He wondered if she was curled under a thin airline blanket, or working even now, editing photos mid-air. Restlessness pushed him from bed. He wandered into the living room and sank onto the couch. The apartment felt hollow without her. No soft hum of her singing in the shower, no scratch of her pen across photo proofs. Even the dogs seemed subdued, stretched out silently near the balcony door. His gaze drifted to her iPad charging on the coffee table. She often left it behind during trips, still synced to their shared accounts. Without thinking, he picked it up and tapped the screen. The lock screen lit up, displaying a single notification. One new message. The preview was just 2 words, "See you again." Elliot frowned and instinctively checked his own phone. The same message notification glowed there, mirrored through iMessage. Probably nothing, he told himself, just a friend. But at 1 in the morning? And those words, "See you again?" His pulse quickened. Almost unwillingly, he unlocked her iPad. Face ID accepted without hesitation. The messages opened. Among threads from her assistant and her agent, one stood out. An ongoing conversation with an unsaved number. No name. A foreign country code he didn't recognize. His chest tightened as he scrolled upward, heart pounding. Unknown. Today was incredible. Seeing you like that. Wow. Camille. Definitely. We'll celebrate when I'm back. Unknown. Can't wait to see you again. Sent earlier that night, Tokyo time. The words slammed into him all at once. Message after message scrolled higher, each one steeped in a familiarity that made his stomach churn. Shared jokes about endless delays between flights. Casual mentions of dinners in Milan. Late nights wandering Shinjuku's neon streets. 2 nights ago, Camille had sent a message. "Miss you. Wish you were here tonight." The reply from this same number had been spare and intimate. Soon. Hold on, beautiful. The floor seemed to shift beneath Elliot's feet. Reading those words felt like stumbling across conversations between strangers, except one of them carried his wife's voice. "Miss you? Wish you were here?" She had never said anything like that to him when she traveled. Camille's affection had always been soft, practiced, polite warmth rather than hunger. Never this tender, never this romantic. The iPad slipped from Elliot's shaking hands and landed on the table with a muted thud. Moose, curled beside him on the couch, stirred at the sound and raised his head, picking up on his owner's unease. Elliot's mind fractured, thoughts scattering in every direction. Who was this man? Someone she had met in Milan or Tokyo, clearly. Both cities kept appearing. A colleague? Another model? His thumb scrolled upward frantically until it stopped on older messages, dated 6 weeks earlier. Unknown. Ciao, Bella. Camille. I'll save you a dance at the Duomo. Unknown. Ha. I'll hold you to that. See you soon. Camille. Matteo. The name detonated in his mind, burning itself into his vision. Matteo. Italian. Milan. And unmistakably, she had been planning to meet him there. Planned to, and, judging by the later exchanges, had followed through. Elliot's mouth went dry as he kept scrolling, hands slick with sweat. Tokyo messages next. Unknown. That street performer had you laughing so hard. Camille. I know, I haven't laughed like that in forever. Unknown. Your smile is incredible. I can't wait to see it again. And everything else. Camille. Shh. Be good. Just get here soon. I need you. The last line struck him like an open flame. A sound, raw and strangled, escaped his throat. Moose jumped up, pressing close, whining softly at the shift in Elliot's breathing. Everything was there, naked and undeniable. Flirting turning into intimacy. Moments blossoming into meetings. An affair stitched together from airports and hotel rooms. She didn't just miss this man, she craved him. Needed him. When had Camille last said she needed Elliot? He shot up from the couch, pacing in tight circles, fingers raking through his hair as something poisonous surged inside him. Pain, fury, dread, all tangled into one. How long had this been happening? How could she do this? The iPad buzzed again. Another message lit the screen. Unknown. Sweet dreams. Next week can't come fast enough. Next week. Camille wasn't scheduled to travel next week, except maybe a quick shoot in Boston. Was he coming here? Or were they planning something else entirely? The sheer audacity left Elliot reeling. His body shook with it. He had to do something. Confront her. Confront him. But what? It was 1 in the morning. She was mid-flight. There was nothing he could do right now. No outlet for the adrenaline screaming through his veins. He collapsed onto the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Moose whimpered softly at his side, bewildered by the storm radiating from him. Then a single word surfaced, sharp and decisive: evidence. He needed to keep everything before it vanished, before she deleted it. With trembling fingers, he forwarded the entire conversation to his own email, captured screenshots, saved every line, saved Mateo's number too. And then silence. He sat there hollow, staring at the wall. The truth settled over him like a sodden blanket. Camille was cheating on him. His Camille, the brilliant, dazzling woman he'd married, the same woman who had sent him a kiss from Narita just this morning, joking about bad airplane coffee. His first instinct was to call her the moment she landed, demand answers, scream if he had to. But another thought slithered in, colder and more deliberate. What if she lied? What if she wept and denied it? What if she erased the messages, spun another story, made him question his own eyes? No. He needed more than confrontation. He needed proof. He needed the truth, undeniable and absolute, before he faced her. He refused to be swayed by excuses or to second-guess what he had already seen with his own eyes. Elliot drew in a slow, uneven breath, chest tight with tension. Technology, artificial intelligence, lies. If Camille confessed to anything, she'd likely spin it, minimize it, make promises she'd never keep. But could he trust her at all now? No. If she was capable of hiding something this deliberate, this deep, then trust had already been destroyed. He couldn't act on emotion anymore. He had to tread carefully. He refused to be the fool in his own marriage again. He would uncover every secret she had buried. He stood, body rigid, movements almost mechanical as he began pacing the living room. His pulse thudded in his ears, but each lap across the carpet only hardened his resolve. He would investigate his own life. By the time the first pale light of morning slipped between the curtains, Elliot Langford had made his choice. He wouldn't confront her, not yet, not blind, not unprepared. First, he would unravel every strand of deception, follow each one to its bitter conclusion. Only then would he decide what the truth demanded of him. Chapter 3. Fractured Threads. That morning, Elliot drove to JFK to meet Camille's flight as usual. But today, nothing felt familiar. He had barely slept an hour. The shock of what he'd discovered the night before clung to him like static, dull, relentless, as he forced polite smiles and filled the silence with meaningless small talk. Camille looked exhausted stepping off the plane, oversized sunglasses concealing her eyes, her forced smile brittle with fatigue. On the drive home, she dozed against the window, her head resting lightly on the glass. Elliot gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles blanched, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. The normalcy of it all unsettled him. She sat beside him, familiar, unchanged. And yet he couldn't erase the image of a different Camille, one who whispered, "I need you," to someone else. When they arrived home, Camille headed straight to the shower, then collapsed into bed. Elliot seized the moment, pretending to unpack her luggage. His hands trembled as he searched through her carry-on, each zipper and fold feeling like a violation of something intimate. In the smallest pocket at the bottom, he found it. A receipt. A luxury restaurant in Tokyo, 2 entrees, a pricey bottle of sake, dated 2 nights ago. She had never mentioned any dinner meetings overseas. He snapped a photo with his phone, then carefully restored everything to its exact place in the bag. Over the next several days, Elliot played the part of the devoted husband, quietly assembling a private ledger of evidence. He combed through Camille's shared digital calendar, the one she used for photo shoots, events, and dinners. Patterns emerged, discrepancies surfaced. 3 separate nights over the past 2 months were marked as work dinners. But Elliot remembered those evenings, her late arrivals, vague excuses about industry contacts. He compared those dates against their joint bank statements, scrutinizing charges she probably assumed he never noticed. A lavish bill from Le Jardin, clearly for 2 meals. Another night she claimed to attend an art opening, 2 premium Broadway tickets. She'd never mentioned the show. The lies piled up, brick upon brick, forming a silent wall between them. Elliot escalated. From an old project at work, he retrieved a tiny voice-activated recorder, unobtrusive, easily hidden. One evening, as Camille left to walk the dogs, he slipped the device behind a row of books on the living room shelf, its microphone aimed toward the couch, her favorite spot for late-night calls. The first night, the recorder captured nothing of interest. Faint humming as she folded laundry, distant chatter from a late-night talk show. But the second night, Elliot set the trap. He told Camille he'd be working late, left the apartment, and parked a block away. From the car, he watched the penthouse windows. When the bedroom light finally blinked out, he crept back inside under cover of darkness and retrieved the device. At 1 a.m., alone in an empty grocery store parking lot, he plugged in his headphones and pressed play. For several minutes, only background noises, the dogs shifting on the floor, a faint siren wailing somewhere far away. Elliot was about to shut it off when Camille's voice cut through, soft, trembling. "Hey, I'm glad you picked up." Elliot's chest constricted. A pause. Then a quiet laugh tinged with sorrow. "I know, I miss you too. It's hard sleeping alone after—" She cut herself off abruptly. His fingers tightened around the recorder. That tone. That warmth. He hadn't heard it from her in months. Camille spoke again, barely above a whisper. "I'm trying. I told him I was working late. We have to be careful. He's starting to suspect." A low, humorless chuckle followed. "I even suggested counseling to throw him off. God, that sounds terrible, doesn't it?" Elliot's heart slammed against his ribs. Each word drove deeper than the last. Then silence. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled, thick with unshed tears he couldn't see. "I can't stop feeling guilty. It's constant. But when I'm with you, Mateo, it's like I can breathe again. I feel alive. I can't give that up. Not yet." Elliot squeezed his eyelids shut, shoving the earbuds deeper into his ears as though burying them further might muffle the words he'd just heard. Mateo. She had said his name. The impact landed like a fist to his stomach, though deep down he had always known. Camille sniffled audibly through the recording. "I promise. After the Vogue shoot in Iceland, the big one I told you about, after that, I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll tell him I need some space or... I don't know yet. But I can't talk to him about this now. He'd never forgive me." Silence followed. All Elliot could hear was the brutal thud of his own heartbeat and Camille's uneven breathing. Then, barely above a whisper, she murmured, "I love you." The words were fragile, a sigh so soft it could have vanished. But to Elliot, they struck with perfect clarity, carving straight through him. He tore the headphones off as if they had burned him, breath ragged, chest heaving. In the sterile chill of his car, the dam finally ruptured. A broken, guttural sound escaped him, half sob, half snarl. She hadn't said "I love you" like that to him in years. That tenderness, that softness. Those words were for another man now, spoken in the dark. Elliot pressed his forearms to the steering wheel, lowering his head as heartbreak tangled with rage inside him. Tears stung his eyes, hot, blinding, but he forced them back. He wouldn't fall apart, not here, not now. With trembling hands, he rewound the recording and listened again. Every word, every pause, forcing himself to absorb the pain, to be certain he hadn't imagined it. No mistake, Camille was having an affair. She lied to him every day. And when Iceland was over, she was planning to leave. By the time the first pale streaks of dawn smeared the sky, Elliot had gathered it all, the messages, the recordings, undeniable proof. And the truth was worse than anything he had feared. This wasn't a fleeting lapse, a moment of weakness. It was months long, cities crossed, plans whispered about the future. Intimacy so deep it mocked everything he thought their marriage was. Quietly, he flipped down the car's sun visor. Bloodshot eyes glared back from the mirror, his face hardened into something unrecognizable, carved from grief and resolve. He thought of the life they broadcast online. Picture-perfect smiles, effortless captions, a flawless facade, all of it paper-thin, now splintering under the weight of reality. Elliot held every jagged piece of that reality in his hands, and somewhere deep inside him, darker instincts stirred. He didn't just want to reveal her betrayal. He wanted her to suffer for it. A memory surfaced from college, a lecture on controlled demolitions in architecture class. Place the charges at the exact stress points, the professor had said. Trigger them correctly, and the building doesn't just fall. It implodes, spectacularly, collapsing into dust in seconds. Camille had just done the same to their marriage. Perhaps, Elliot thought bitterly, as morning light cut across his face, it was only fair to return the favor. He would confront her, but not the way she'd expect. He would choose the place, the timing, the advantage. And when that moment came, apologies wouldn't be enough. Tears wouldn't be enough. He hungered for revenge, sharp, deliberate, and absolute. Chapter 4. The confrontation deferred. Elliot didn't confront Camille right away. Instead, he let an entire day crawl past. Fury coiled inside him like a fist clenched too tightly to open. He drifted through his routine on autopilot, answering emails, enduring meetings, offering vacant nods as a coworker joked about how tired he looked. Beneath the dull mask, his resolve was crystallizing into something cold and lethal. Tonight, he told himself, tonight she'll hear me, and I won't be the one begging for forgiveness. Camille came home around 7 that evening. She'd texted earlier, said she was meeting a friend for coffee. Elliot's jaw locked at the lie, but his reply was smooth. No problem. See you soon. Controlled. Measured. When she walked into the penthouse, Elliot stood at the kitchen counter, knife in hand, rhythmically slicing vegetables he didn't intend to cook. His pulse thundered, but outwardly, he was calm. Hey, Camille said gently, setting her bag down. There was a cautious note in her tone, as if some instinct warned her something was wrong. She leaned in, kissed his cheek. If she noticed the slight flinch, she didn't mention it. Hey, Elliot replied evenly, drying his hands on a dish towel. How was coffee with Liz, right? There was the briefest pause before she nodded. Liz says hi. It was good to catch up. He switched off the faucet, couldn't pretend anymore. Enough. Drawing a deep breath, Elliot turned to face her fully across the kitchen island. We need to talk, Camille. The weight in his voice snapped her attention to him. Her muscles stiffened instinctively. All right, she answered warily. Talk about what? He motioned toward the living room. Sit. Without waiting for her, he strode past her and circled the couch. Camille followed, a faint crease forming between her brows. She lowered herself onto the cushions, while Elliot stayed on his feet, restless energy coiled tight in his body. His fingers twitched toward the pocket of his hoodie where an envelope rested heavy. Receipts, call logs, proof. He hadn't rehearsed this moment, but the words erupted raw, unpolished. I know you've been cheating on me. Camille went rigid. Her lips parted in shock, eyes widening. For several seconds, silence pressed between them. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen filled the room. Her breath caught. She exhaled in a trembling rush. Elliot, what are you even talking about? Don't, he snapped, and sharper than he meant to. He snatched her tablet from the coffee table and tossed it onto the couch beside her. The screen was still lit, exposing the string of incriminating messages with Mateo. Camille recoiled, as if the device itself might burn her. Her hand hovered over it, shaking, her complexion draining pale. You went through my... she started, voice cracking with panic. I read everything. Elliot cut across her, arms locking tightly over his chest like he was holding himself together. The texts, the emails, the dinners you didn't mention, the trips, every detail. Her eyes darted over the glowing messages. He recognized the moment it sank in, her own words reflected back at her. Can't wait to see you again. A strangled noise escaped her throat. She looked up at him, tears already pooling. Elliot, let me explain. Explain? His voice shook with fury. Explain how my wife tells another man she loves him? How she meets him in hotel rooms in Milan and Tokyo behind my back? Go on, explain that. Camille folded inward, hands covering her face. A sob ripped from her chest, muffled by her palms. I'm so sorry, she cried. I never meant to hurt you. The apology only fueled the fire in him. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd known this moment was coming. "When did it start?" he demanded, his tone cold and clipped. Slowly, she lowered her hands, streaking mascara across her cheeks. Her voice shook. 5 months ago, in Los Angeles, at that photography workshop. That's where I met Matteo. He works for a fashion house. At first it was just talking, I swear. But we stayed in contact. And then, Milan. It turned into more. Elliot's eyes shut briefly. 5 months. 5 months while he'd been oblivious, believing they were just busy, pulled in different directions. Camille rushed on, words spilling fast and uneven. "I didn't plan for any of this. I wasn't looking for him. I was overwhelmed, Elliot. Lonely. I made a terrible mistake." "Not a mistake!" Elliot snapped, eyes flashing open. "Mistakes don't last for months. This was a choice you kept making, over and over. You even brought him here, didn't you?" She flinched hard. "That text, the one about Moose hogging your side of the bed, that wasn't about the dog, was it? That was him in our bed." Her shoulders convulsed. She couldn't meet his eyes. "One time," she whispered, voice breaking. "He came to New York when you were in Chicago for that conference. God, I hate myself for it." Another sob tore from her throat as she buried her face in her hands. Elliot felt his stomach twist, bile rising as memories slammed into him. That trip to Chicago, calling her every night, believing her distant tone was loneliness. Meanwhile, another man had been lying in his bed, touching his wife, petting his dog. He turned away, pacing, dragging his hands through his hair. If he looked at her now, crumpled and crying, he wasn't sure what would come out, or what he might do. "I never wanted it to go this far," Camille choked into the tense silence. "Matteo, he made me feel alive when I was so numb. I was burned out, and you were never home." "Don't you dare put this on me," Elliot growled, whirling to face her. His voice dropped to something low and lethal. "I was breaking my back to give us a future, and you were too busy screwing someone else to care." Camille flinched like he'd struck her. "You're right," she whispered quickly. "This isn't your fault, not any of it, it's mine." Her words wavered, fraying at the edges. Her eyes, rimmed red and glistening with tears, locked on him. "Elliot, I'm so sorry." The guilt had lived in her for months, eating away at her from the inside, relentless and heavy. She reached for him, a hesitant motion, yearning for even the faintest connection. But Elliot recoiled before her fingertips came close, retreating instinctively. The thought of her touch, of her skin against his, was unbearable. Not now. Her hand faltered, falling limp into her lap, and a shaky sob escaped her throat. "I ended it," she choked out, breathing unevenly, each inhale sharp and shallow. "The message you saw, that was me trying to let him go gently. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I swear I cut him off." Elliot's memory betrayed him then, the recording flashing through his mind like a wound ripped open. That voice message he could never unhear. His jaw tightened until it ached. "I can't just pretend that never happened." There was something else beneath her words, a hollow ring, a truth unsaid. "Stop!" he snapped, shaking his head. Disbelief laced his tone like acid. "Stop lying." His eyes locked onto hers. "I know you were planning to see him next week. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Her face blanched, panic flickering across it like lightning. She hadn't thought he knew. "How did you—" she began, stumbling over her words, then pivoted desperately. "It doesn't matter. I'll cancel. I'll block him. You'll never hear his name from me again. I promise." Her breath hitched, ragged and uneven. "I'll do anything, Elliot. Anything to fix this. Please." Before he could respond, she slid off the couch and collapsed onto the rug at his feet. The rawness of the gesture stole his breath for a moment. Her trembling hands reached for his, and this time he let her take them. Not out of mercy, but because he needed to see her face as she spoke. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in dark rivers. She looked smaller than she ever had, fragile, wrecked, clutching him like he was the only thing keeping her from drowning. "I was selfish. I was reckless. I was wrong, she whispered, voice fracturing. But even through all of it, I never stopped loving you, not for a single moment. You have to believe me. Elliot stared at the woman kneeling before him, the woman he had once centered his entire world around. Her regret wasn't in question, not right now anyway. But the ruin she'd left behind stretched between them like shards of broken glass, impossible to cross without bleeding. You destroyed us, he rasped, voice raw, barely above a whisper. Do you understand that? Everything we had, gone. Camille shook her head violently, tears streaming faster. No, she cried, voice breaking. Don't say that. We can fix this. We can rebuild. We'll go to therapy, for real this time, not just to pretend. Her grip on his hands tightened, knuckles paling under the strain. Please, Elliot, I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me a chance. He stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Inside him, war raged. Rage and heartbreak, the urge to scream, to throw her out, to collapse under the weight of it all. But her words from that recording echoed in his mind. He'll never forgive me. She'd already assumed he'd let her go, expected it, braced herself for it. And Elliot wasn't ready to give her that freedom, not yet. Maybe not ever. He pulled his hands away slowly and gestured toward the couch. Get up, he said, voice flat. Sit down. Sniffling, Camille scrambled back onto the sofa, wiping at her smeared mascara with shaking fingers. Elliot crossed the room, grabbed her phone from her purse by the door, and placed it firmly in her hands. Delete his number, he ordered. Right now, while I watch. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the device. Her heartbeat pounded so hard he could almost hear it. She found Mateo's contact, no nickname, just the number, and erased it. One by one, she deleted every message. It's gone, she whispered. That's not enough, Elliot said, tone like ice. Text him, end it. Tell him never to contact you again. Camille froze, terror flashing in her eyes. Oh, okay. Her thumbs trembled as they hovered over the screen, each keystroke awkward and deliberate. Elliot leaned in just close enough to see the words forming on her phone. This is the end. Do not contact me again. I am committed to my husband and will not betray him any longer. The message cut like glass, sharp, final, without room for softening. Elliot gave the slightest nod. Send it. Camille hesitated, her finger suspended as though she stood on the edge of a sheer drop. And then, with a breath she didn't realize she was holding, she pressed. The faint sound of the message sending felt like a door slamming shut. Almost instantly, 3 dots blinked on the screen. Mateo was already typing. Camille flipped the phone face down, locking it, shutting out whatever reply might come. Moments later, the phone buzzed with an incoming response. She didn't look. I told him, Camille whispered. A ragged exhale escaped her lips as she lifted swollen, tear-streaked eyes toward Elliot. Thank you for staying, for letting me try to make this right. Elliot felt nothing, only a vast, echoing emptiness. He hadn't promised forgiveness, he hadn't promised anything. Yet she clung to his presence, as if the simple fact that he remained meant there was still hope. We'll see, he muttered, voice rigid, controlled. He turned away, dragging a hand through his hair, trying to tame the storm brewing beneath his skin. The adrenaline that had carried him here was ebbing, leaving only exhaustion and a smoldering resentment that refused to fade. I think we should do counseling, he said finally, words flat, practical. If there's even a chance to fix this, we need help. Camille nodded frantically. Yes, of course. I'll find someone tomorrow. Her eagerness almost stirred pity in him, almost. She looked so desperate now, like a child desperate to appease. There's one condition, he said, turning back to face her. Absolute honesty. From this moment forward, if you feel lonely, unsure, anything, you tell me. No more lies, no more secrets. If you want even the smallest chance to rebuild my trust, you owe me that. I will, Camille swore, fists clenched in her lap. I promise, Elliot, I'll be completely open. You can check my phone, my email, I don't care. I have nothing to hide anymore. I just want us back. Us? Did that even exist anymore? Was there anything left to salvage? Elliot didn't ask. He only nodded stiffly. All right. The silence that followed was taut, trembling. Camille's face was raw, streaked with remorse and fragile hope. Elliot's expression betrayed nothing. Cold stone carved into the shape of a man. To an outsider, they might have looked like a couple standing at the threshold of reconciliation. For a brief moment, Elliot let her believe it. Let her believe she could glue the pieces back together. And maybe, in the deepest corner of himself, he wanted to believe it too. But under his calm surface, truth simmered, darker, crueler. Some wounds never close, and the part of him that had awakened that night in the pre-dawn parking lot, the part craving vengeance, was still wide awake. Unappeased, he stepped forward, surprising her by drawing her into a gentle embrace. Camille collapsed into him, sobs trembling through her small frame. Elliot stared past her shoulder, eyes unfocused, hollow. It's going to be okay, he murmured, stroking her hair, giving her the comfort she needed to believe in. Inside, he felt nothing but ice. She thinks this is the worst of it, he thought. She has no idea. Holding his penitent wife close, Elliot Langford allowed the faintest flicker of a grim, calculated smile to touch his lips, unseen. The pieces of his plan were already sliding into place. He would not forgive, he would not forget. He would wait, he would strike. Softly he spoke, one day at a time. Camille clung tighter, mistaking the hollow words for hope. Elliot patted her back lightly, eyes already distant, already beyond her. He could play the devoted husband for as long as needed. Attend therapy, pretend to rebuild, wear the mask of understanding, all while quietly constructing the quiet, exquisite ruin of her world. Chapter 5. The Blueprint of Revenge. The weeks that followed unfolded under a fragile, uneasy ceasefire. Every Thursday at 7 sharp, Elliot and Camille sat side by side on the plush couch in Dr. Haviland's softly lit office. Watercolor paintings dotted the walls. The steady tick of a metronome filled the pauses between their words. Camille spoke through tears, shame and fear spilling from her in broken sentences. Elliot answered in measured tones, speaking of shattered trust, the need for honesty, the faint hope of repair. To any observer, he appeared to be a wounded husband trying valiantly to forgive. But within him, Elliot's heart was a frozen lake, smooth and still on the surface, dangerous and brittle beneath. Every whispered apology from Camille, every desperate glance she threw his way, only deepened Elliot's recollection of her betrayal. In the therapy room, his responses were carefully measured. Restrained nods, clipped murmurs, vague agreements, all concealing the darker undercurrent of thoughts pulsing beneath his outward calm. Back at home, Camille performed the role of the perfect partner with unnerving precision. She shared her daily routines without prompting, left her phone lying face up on the kitchen counter, even purged her social media accounts, claiming she needed to prioritize us. Her movements through the house carried the weight of penance, as though each act of domestic devotion was another step toward forgiveness. And to her credit, the remorse seemed genuine. On some nights, when she thought he couldn't hear, Elliot would catch the faint sound of her sobbing behind the locked bathroom door, the running faucet barely disguising her cries. But by then, those sounds hardly touched him. His thoughts were already elsewhere, drafting and redrafting an idea the way an architect refines blueprints. A single conviction had taken root and refused to loosen its hold. This could not go unanswered. Even if there was still some remote chance of saving the marriage, which he doubted, forgiveness on its own would never suffice. Camille's betrayal had hollowed out something vital in him, and he intended to take something from her in return. The perfect weakness presented itself almost immediately. Camille's sense of self had always revolved around her career, her pride, her anchor. And now she was on the brink of her most significant milestone yet, a week-long, high-profile Vogue fashion shoot in Iceland. She had spent months talking about it, the concept, the prestige, the fact that it would debut in the coveted September issue. One evening, Elliot found her in her modest home studio, hunched over a mood board for the trip. From the doorway, He watched as she pinned inspiration images to the corkboard, frozen tundras, models swathed in windswept couture. Even after everything, he couldn't ignore how animated she became when speaking about her work. Her tone lifted, almost luminous, as she detailed the custom gowns being shipped overseas and the hand-picked creative team she had assembled. "This is it," she murmured, excitement tempered by nerves. "The biggest shoot of my career. If it lands, it could make my name." Elliot stepped into the room, forcing warmth into his smile. He ran a finger across one pinned photo, a model's reflection fractured against a glacial backdrop. "It's going to be extraordinary," he told her. "They're lucky to have you." Camille looked up, hesitant yet grateful. "Thank you. I've just been so worried that—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind. It just means everything to know you believe in me, especially now." He gave a reassuring nod and left her to her work. Shattering her confidence now would be premature. Better to let her pour her entire being into this project. That way, the aftermath would strike like a blade. When Camille finally slept, Elliot remained awake, bathed in the cold glow of his laptop. The vague revenge he had been shaping crystallized into something sharp, dangerous even. He didn't care, in fact the precision of it thrilled him. He would weaponize her own art against her. His nights became consumed by research, photography forums, tech blogs, obscure threads on metadata manipulation and plagiarism detection algorithms. He discovered that Vogue, like most major publications, ran every submission through vast databases, cross-checking for duplicates or suspicious similarities. These scans didn't stop at visible images. They also probed the hidden metadata, timestamps, camera serial numbers, embedded author tags. A thought struck him. What if Camille's masterpiece was flagged as stolen? The key would be subtlety. He couldn't simply copy another photographer's work outright. The visual differences would be obvious long before submission. But metadata? Metadata lived beneath the surface, invisible yet damning. If he could forge those buried fingerprints to mimic another artist's work, the system itself would condemn her. Late at night, Elliot scoured obscure portfolios until he found the perfect target, a little-known Scandinavian photographer whose glacier portraits had once won a modest award. One image stood out, a woman framed behind fractured glass beneath the aurora borealis. The concept mirrored Camille's own shattered mirror theme closely enough to draw suspicion. Even better, that photograph had been caught in a minor plagiarism scandal, guaranteeing its metadata was permanently cataloged in plagiarism databases. Perfect. In the pale blue light of the living room, Elliot downloaded the Scandinavian photographer's award-winning image and dismantled its metadata, its unique author tag, its digital fingerprint. A grim smile tugged at his lips, almost too easy. Using techniques from hidden corners of the internet, he embedded those same identifying markers into one of Camille's high-resolution test shots. To the naked eye, the image was untouched, unmistakably hers. But buried in its code, it screamed another name. He ran it through demo plagiarism software. A red alert flared across the screen, a perfect match to the Scandinavian's work. Elliot closed the laptop slowly, his pulse hammering. Inserting the corrupted file into Camille's chute would be the last step. But he had already solved that problem too. He knew she would bring her laptop to Iceland and upload selected images daily to Vogue's secure New York server. He had overheard her confirm the process during a call. Password protected, yes, but her passwords were as familiar to him as his own. If he managed to slip into her files while she was away in Iceland, he wouldn't have to put himself in harm's way at all. Camille, meticulous to a fault, had left a mirrored copy of her entire portfolio on the desktop at their house, a safeguard in case the travel laptop failed her mid-assignment. She'd even mentioned that the Vogue shoot would be synced to their shared cloud storage, so he could peek in and watch her progress from afar. Sweet, really. A small gesture, an invitation to witness her unpolished work as she built it. A gesture of trust, a sign she wanted him back inside her orbit, despite everything that had fractured them. The irony nearly made him laugh. Without realizing it, Camille had delivered him exactly what he'd been waiting for. A week before she left, they'd sat side by side in Dr. Haviland's office, as they did every Thursday. Elliot had played his role to perfection, the wronged husband striving toward forgiveness, while Camille spoke brightly about her cautious optimism, how she believed they were finally turning a corner. Dr. Haviland, ever encouraging, applauded their persistence, lauding them for showing up week after week despite the hurt. Elliot had smiled when appropriate, squeezed Camille's hand at the right moments, nodded along with the therapist's affirmations, all while nursing his own private plan for a betrayal of his own. One that would circle back to her. The night before Camille's departure, he'd helped zip up the heavy cases that cradled her cameras, same as he had before Milan. The moment was eerily familiar, only this time, heavier somehow. He kissed her softly, murmuring reassurance, that she would shine, that he was proud of her, that he believed in her entirely. Her eyes had brimmed with tears, raw with relief. She must have thought this was it. Final proof he had forgiven her. Later, in the dark of their bedroom, she curled against his chest, fingers tracing faint circles over his skin. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Not about the job. About leaving you. I don't want to lose what we've been building back." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You won't," he lied gently. "We'll talk every day. Just focus on the work and come home to me." She wrapped her arms around him, whispering into his neck, "Thank you for trusting me with this." Elliot stared over her shoulder into the dark ceiling, eyes unblinking, cold. Camille drifted into exhausted sleep. He didn't. He lay awake, heart pounding, not with guilt, but with anticipation. In a matter of days, she would be swallowed by Iceland's wild expanse, chasing the most important images of her career, blissfully unaware of the trap embedded in her own files. A deception crafted with surgical precision, and with the intimacy of someone she trusted completely. He turned to look at her face in the faint glow of the alarm clock. For one brief, traitorous moment, something ached in him, a ghost of love, or perhaps the faintest stir of conscience. It wasn't nearly enough to stop him. Chapter 6, Mirrors and Smoke. Camille stepped off the rattling prop plane and straight into a wind so sharp it felt like shards of ice cutting through her parka. The tiny airport at Akureyri buzzed with motion, crew members hauling camera gear toward a row of waiting jeeps. The air smelled clean, electric, edged with snow. Her pulse thrummed with exhilaration. Beyond the runway, mountains cloaked in white surged toward a sky the color of hammered steel. This luminous alien landscape would be her canvas for the week ahead. With stiff, half-numb fingers, she pulled out her phone and tapped a quick message to Elliot. "Just landed in paradise. Love you." His reply appeared almost instantly. "Love you too. Can't wait to see your magic. Stay warm." Camille smiled, a small knot in her chest loosening. Every kindness from him felt hard-won now, and all the more precious. In the days before the trip, he'd been attentive in ways she hadn't expected, asking about her concepts, steadying her whenever doubt crept in. The night before she left, they'd even video-called unexpectedly, talking late into the night, promises whispered back and forth, a quiet reminder of why they were still fighting for each other at all. She refused to fail him again. The first 2 days of shooting unfolded better than she dared hope. Camille orchestrated her models across black sand beaches and frozen lagoons, staging dreamlike collisions of couture against Iceland's brutal beauty. Adrenaline kept her warm even as the wind gnawed her raw. Every night back at the cabin base camp, she called Elliot as promised, swaddled in thermal blankets, voice still buzzing with exhilaration. She told him everything. How the aurora had erupted without warning, emerald fire streaking across the night as a gown's silhouette burned against it. How one of the models had slipped near a steaming hot spring, nearly falling in, everyone laughing breathlessly in the aftermath. On her screen, Elliot's face looked proud, genuinely proud. "That's incredible," he said warmly. "I knew you'd crush it. Can't wait to see the previews." "They're even better than I imagined," Camille admitted, eyes alight. "I'm uploading a few selects tonight for the editors. The folder's open. You can look too. I will, Elliot promised, smiling. I miss you, but I'm so glad it's going this well. I miss you too, she murmured, almost inaudible. Only a few more days, he replied. If she caught the strain threading through his words, she didn't let it show. By the third afternoon, just after the camp had finished lunch, Camille slipped into the communications tent, her laptop tucked under one arm. She needed to transmit her newest selects to the Vogue editors in New York. She booted up the satellite link and carefully curated 5 photographs she believed were the pinnacle of her career so far. As the files began crawling toward the server, her chest fluttered with exhilaration so strong it almost felt like lightness. Beyond the tent, sleet pelted the canvas, sharp and relentless. Inside, she felt lifted, electric. She couldn't wait to see the editorial team's response. These weren't just good images. They were the best she'd ever taken. She typed a quick note to accompany the upload. Day 3 selects attached. Imagine Narnia colliding with Kuchar. Blizzard nearly ate us alive to get these, worth every frozen fingertip. More soon. Camille. With a long exhale, she clicked send and watched the progress bars crawl to completion. Half a world away, Elliot sat at their home computer, logged into the same shared folder. Weeks earlier, he'd installed remote access software precisely for this purpose. Now he waited, watching each image appear in real time. His timing had to be perfect. The moment the largest file, a high-resolution TIFF featuring the mirror concept, completed syncing, he acted. In less than a minute, he swapped it for an altered version, embedding a subtle watermark. He matched the file name and timestamp precisely. Nothing about the file would appear tampered with. The entire exchange was invisible. Back in Iceland, Camille's laptop chimed with a cheerful notification. Upload complete. Pleased, oblivious to the quiet sabotage, she closed the lid and leaned back with a contented smile. Her proudest work now carried an imperceptible flaw, venom masked by brilliance. That evening, worsening weather forced the crew to shut down early. With unexpected free time, Camille retreated to the bunks and, on impulse, called Elliot earlier than their usual schedule. After sending those previews, she craved his voice. He answered on the second ring. Well, this is a surprise, Elliot said, warmth in his tone. She could faintly hear glass clinking on his end, probably pouring himself a drink. Hi, she said, smiling despite herself. Storm's got us grounded for the night. Did you see the images? I did, Elliot said. Camille, they're breathtaking. The mirror shot with the northern lights. Honestly, I got chills. Heat rose to her cheeks. His praise meant more than she expected. Really? You think the editors will see it the same way? I can't imagine they wouldn't, he said firmly. You're making something unforgettable. Camille let out a slow breath, tension sliding off her shoulders. Thank you, she said softly. I needed to hear that. They lingered on the line, sharing small stories. Camille recounting a mistranslated joke from their Icelandic driver, Elliot laughing about his failed attempt at making dinner. For a while, the miles between them seemed to vanish, replaced by something tender and familiar. Just before hanging up, Elliot's voice dropped to a gentler register. I'm proud of you, Camille, and I love you. I needed you to know that. Her throat tightened, emotion catching her off guard. I love you too, she whispered. More than anything, I'm going to fix this. Us. I promise. I know, he said quietly. There was a shadow in his tone she mistook for lingering hurt. Be safe. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow, she echoed. After the call, Camille lay back in her bunk, wrapped in a fragile warmth she hadn't felt in months. Outside, the storm screamed against the tents, but she fell asleep easily, dreaming of northern lights and Elliot's arms around her. The reckoning came the next morning. At 6 a.m., Camille woke to an urgent email from Vogue's director of photography. Still half buried in her sleeping bag, she squinted at the subject line and opened it. Camille, one of your files, DSC32441.tiff, has triggered a red alert in our system. The image appears alarmingly similar to work by another artist. We need immediate confirmation of its originality. Please send us the raw file and any adjacent frames from the same sequence. Until this is resolved, all processing is on hold. Diane. Camille bolted upright, adrenaline burning away sleep. Similar to another artist's work? Impossible. She had never stolen or replicated anyone's imagery, consciously or otherwise. The accusation was absurd. Assuming it had to be a software glitch or some mistaken flag, she snatched up her laptop and sprinted to the communications tent. Outside, sleet hissed against the gray morning. Worry coiled tight in her stomach. She typed a terse professional reply. Hi, Diane. All of my images are original. There must be some kind of error. Attaching the raw file for DSC 3241, plus alternate frames from that sequence. Her hands trembled as she hit send. If you need anything, just say so. The message popped onto her screen. Camille plugged in her external hard drive and began offloading the massive raw file, watching the sluggish progress bar creep forward. Her fingertips drummed against the table, every beat syncing with the tension twisting in her stomach. Requests like this didn't come often. Something or someone had shaken Vogue badly enough to demand immediate answers. By the time the transfer finally wrapped up, Camille was nursing a mug of lukewarm instant coffee, hoping the bitterness might calm her nerves. That was when her phone rang. Marianne, her agent. Camille straightened her posture and forced steadiness into her voice. Hi, Marianne. Thank God, Marianne breathed, sounding frayed like she hadn't slept in days. Camille, what's happening? Vogue called me at 2 a.m, our time. They're saying one of the photos you submitted might be... She hesitated, then dropped the word like a stone. Plagiarized. Camille's chest tightened. That's impossible, she blurted, the word instinctive yet hollow in her own ears. Every single shot is mine, taken here, by me. There has to be some kind of error. Marianne's voice lowered, even though they were thousands of miles apart. I want to believe that, but the rumors are already spreading. A fashion blogger tweeted about Vogue opening a plagiarism inquiry, and your name is everywhere. I've been putting out fires since sunrise. Camille swallowed hard. Her coffee turned acrid on her tongue. Oh my God. I know, Marianne said quietly. Right now, you need to prove that photo is yours. Vogue says they've reached out to the other photographer, she's Scandinavian, I think, and her team. There may be a review panel. A review panel? Camille nearly shouted, disbelief sharp in her voice. Marianne, I've done nothing wrong. I can prove it. I still have all the raws. Good, Marianne replied firmly. Send them everything. And Camille, stay calm. We'll get through this. When the call ended, Camille realized her hands were shaking so hard she could barely set the phone down. Outside the thin canvas walls of the tent, the crew stirred awake, prepping gear for the day's shoot. Camille stayed frozen at the table. A new email alert blinked on her laptop. From Diane at Vogue. Camille, thank you for forwarding the raw file. Our tech team is comparing it against the other photographer's materials. The issue is that your file's metadata aligns with hers in several key fields. It may be an anomaly, but we must investigate fully. Please avoid uploading additional images until further notice. Metadata. Camille wasn't a tech specialist, but she understood enough. Metadata carried hidden details. Timestamps, camera settings, GPS coordinates. For her file to match another photographer's? How could that even happen? A cold ripple crawled across her skin. Had her files been altered? But by whom and when? She'd been meticulous, transferring every shot straight from her memory cards. The only time the files left her control was when she uploaded them to the shared cloud folder Elliot also accessed. No, Elliot wouldn't. He was the one person she trusted completely, wasn't he? Her thoughts spun. The walls of the tent felt like they were closing in. She pressed her palms to the table, willing herself to stay grounded. She was overthinking. It had to be a glitch. Maybe Vogue's system had flagged something wrong. Suddenly, the stale air inside the tent became unbearable. She shoved the flap open and stepped into the biting wind. Around her, the crew hustled cheerfully, loading gear into vehicles. None of them had any idea what was happening. For their sake, she masked her panic. They caravanned toward the next shoot location, a luminous ice cave beneath the glacier, while Camille sat wordless in the jeep, phone clutched tight, waiting for news that never came. By mid-morning, her anxiety had sharpened into something raw and electric. Unable to think clearly, she pulled her assistant aside, muttered an excuse about a malfunctioning lens, and called off the shoot. The crew, though disappointed, packed up and returned to base camp. By afternoon, everything spiraled. Fashion news sites had already latched onto the story. Camille Langford's Vogue shoot halted amid plagiarism accusations. Another headline speculated whether she'd overextended herself and resorted to imitating obscure work. It felt unreal and humiliating. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Colleagues, friends, even vague acquaintances demanding explanations. Through it all, Elliot stayed in touch. The moment the first article broke, he called. His voice brimmed with outrage and concern, so much that, for a fleeting second, Camille almost believed it. "This is insane," he said, anger pulsing through the line. "They haven't even finished investigating, and someone leaks it to the press? I'm so sorry, Camille. You don't deserve this." "I don't even understand how this is happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. She sat curled on the narrow cot, shoulders hunched, fingertips pressing hard against her temple as the throb behind her eyes intensified with each beat of her heart. "Everything I sent them was mine," she whispered, voice ragged. "You saw the proofs yourself, Elliot. Every frame I shot them." "I know," he murmured, voice gentle, soothing as a balm on raw skin. "And once they actually review it, they'll see it's a mistake. This industry thrives on chaos. They need something to gossip about, a scandal to devour. That's all this is. It'll blow over." Camille let her eyes close, letting the low murmur of his reassurance wash over her like a thin blanket in winter. "Thank you. I just wish you were here," she breathed. "I feel like I'm falling apart." "I wish I was there too," Elliot replied softly. "No matter what Vogue decides, we'll survive it. One misstep won't erase everything you've built." Her head tipped forward in a faint nod, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "God, I hope you're right." That night, the answer arrived in her inbox. Vogue's message was terse, clinical. The Iceland spread was being suspended. Their forensic review couldn't conclusively prove that Camille's disputed image wasn't derived from another artist's work. The safest path, the email said, was to halt publication and likely redo the shoot entirely, with someone untainted by controversy. In a single paragraph, the dream she had bled herself dry for, sleepless nights, frozen hands, every fragment of her vision, collapsed into ruin. Camille read the email alone in a narrow hallway, the base camp lit only by a flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. The silence felt heavy, almost physical. Most of the team had gone to bed after a strained dinner, the unspoken tension hovering like smoke. Online whispers had spread too fast to outrun. She should have been furious. Panic should have clawed up her ribs. Instead, something colder, sharper took root, an icy clarity. This wasn't chance. Someone had orchestrated it. And in the deepest, most private corner of her thoughts, the place she'd been avoiding, she already knew who. The realization hit like a stone sinking through water. She replayed the last few weeks, Elliot's strange calm during her spiraling panic, the careful neutrality in his gaze, his eagerness to help by combing through her files. Camille pressed a trembling fist to her lips, nausea surging. Could the man who whispered love to her, the man she'd betrayed, truly be dismantling her, piece by deliberate piece? She remembered the acid edge in his voice the night they fought, the reconciliation that had come too easily, too smooth. Cold dread coiled down her spine. The hallway walls seemed to close around her. She staggered to her feet. She had to leave, now. Her flight wasn't scheduled for another 2 days, but by midday she had arranged an early departure. The shoot was dead anyway, the crew subdued, quietly sympathetic. They hugged her, murmured quiet condolences, helped her pack. Camille moved through it all in a haze, her heartbeat pounding with equal parts rage and grief. If her suspicion was right, Elliot had destroyed her deliberately. If she was wrong, she was unraveling, blaming the man she'd already wounded. On the plane to New York, she twisted her wedding band again and again, stomach knotted. Either way, nothing could go back to what it had been. Chapter 7. Frostbitten Fallout. Camille's flight touched down in New York beneath a bruised pre-dawn sky, rain threatening on the horizon. Walking through the near-empty terminal felt unreal, as though she were drifting inside someone else's nightmare. The expedition had started with so much promise and ended in quiet wreckage. Elliot waited just beyond security, wearing jeans and the navy sweater she had always loved. For a fleeting second, the sight of him lifted something inside her. Relief, the faint comfort of home. Then the memory of why she had rushed back struck like a blow, shattering that fragile reprieve. He stepped forward, gathering her, luggage and all, into his arms. Camille remained stiff, her own arms hanging useless at her sides. Still, she breathed him in, cedar, worn cotton, the familiar cologne that once grounded her. Stop, she told herself harshly. If he had done what she feared, every trace of comfort was a lie. Elliot eased back, hands warm on her shoulders, searching her face. "You okay?" he asked softly. "You're pale." A surge of grief and fury rose so suddenly she thought she might choke. She swallowed hard, forcing the words out evenly. "Just tired." "Come on," he said, "let's get you home." He took her carry-on without another word. The drive into Manhattan was quiet. Morning traffic was sparse, the city gray and half asleep. Camille stared out the window, silent, while Elliot reached across the console and squeezed her hand. "We'll get past this," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear. To anyone else it might have sounded like comfort, soft and reassuring. But Camille noticed something he probably didn't realize. He never looked at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, knuckles tight around the steering wheel. "How can you stay so calm?" The question slipped out before she could catch it. Her voice trembled, carrying more edge than she meant. Elliot flicked a glance her way, then quickly returned his focus forward. "What do you mean? My career is hanging by a thread," she burst out, heat flaring in her chest. "Everyone thinks I'm a fraud and you're just steady?" The sharpness in her words startled even her. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Because one of us has to be steady. I'm trying to hold things together for you, Camille." The words were kind, but something in the way he said them scraped at her raw nerves. She turned toward the window, wondering if she'd imagined the faint strain in his tone. By the time they reached home, Camille's anxiety had crystallized into something unbearable. She needed answers. She needed to hear it from him directly. "But how did you even form a question like that? Did you destroy me on purpose, love?" Elliot guided her to a chair at the kitchen table and moved about the room with quiet efficiency. "Chamomile tea." Camille sat rigid, watching him prepare it as though they were living in some version of normal, her husband making tea while her entire world dangled over the edge, possibly because of him. When he set the steaming mug in front of her, she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Elliot," she said slowly, every word pressed through the pounding in her throat. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." He lowered himself into the chair across from her, brow creased with concern. "Of course." Her fingers curled tightly around the mug, seeking steadiness in its heat. "This scandal with my photo." Her tongue darted over dry lips. "Is there any chance you had something to do with it?" Silence. Elliot's face didn't flinch, no surprise, no outrage. If anything, he looked like someone who had known this moment would come. Seconds stretched painfully long. Sweat dampened Camille's palms. "Elliot," she whispered, voice breaking with desperation. "Please, I won't be angry, I need the truth." He studied her quietly, head tilted slightly, his dark eyes impossible to read. And in that unreadability, she found her answer. She had been hoping, aching for immediate denial, for indignant shock. Instead, he seemed to be deciding which part of himself to reveal. At last he exhaled and dragged a hand through his hair. Do you remember what I told you the night I confronted you? He asked softly. That I'd shattered our marriage? Her voice quavered. He gave a faint nod, almost to himself. I meant it. He rose abruptly, pacing the length of the kitchen, tension thick enough to choke on. You did something unforgivable, Camille. And I sat in therapy, swallowed it, tried to be the bigger person. He turned on her then, eyes burning with a cold fury she had never seen before. But it ate me alive every single day. Every time I looked at you, I saw him, heard you laughing with him, felt the lies. Camille's stomach plummeted. She shrank back into the chair. So you decided to punish me? She whispered. He leaned over the counter, fists pressing hard into the stone. You call it punishment. I call it consequence. The words landed like blows. You broke something in me, he said evenly, voice low and razor sharp. So I broke something in you. The room tilted around her. Camille gripped the edge of the stool, struggling to steady herself. The Vogue shoot, she murmured, nausea clawing up her throat. You sabotaged it. Elliot didn't answer at first. His jaw tightened. I planted a seed of doubt, he admitted finally. Just enough for you to feel a fraction of what I felt. A fraction? Camille echoed, stunned. Tears blurred her vision. Elliot, you obliterated my professional reputation. How could you? Her voice cracked apart. His face flickered through anger, regret, pain. She couldn't tell which was real. How could I? He snapped suddenly, his voice breaking into a shout. How could you, Camille? I gave you everything and you threw it away for a fling. You broke my heart, you broke us. Camille's tears spilled freely, her chest aching. I know, she sobbed. I know I did, she breathed, her voice fracturing into silence. And I'm sorry. The apology clawed at her chest, heavier with every beat of her heart. I've woken up every day since, drowning in that regret. But now, staring at what he'd done, the scale of it hit her like a tidal wave. This is unforgivable? Elliot cut in, his voice sharp as broken glass, dripping bitterness. That the word you're reaching for? Like sleeping with someone else while you're married? Unforgivable? Her lungs seized, breath uneven, as his words landed like cold steel. In that instant, two truths solidified inside her, unshakable and cruel. First, the man standing before her was no longer the one she had once loved. He was someone unrecognizable, capable of a viciousness she never imagined. Second, she was the reason he had become that man. They stood rigid on opposite sides of the kitchen island, his body trembling with fury, hers trembling with sorrow. Camille's hand swept across her damp face, the remnants of anger dissolving into hollow emptiness. So all of it meant nothing, she whispered, barely more than a ghost of sound. The promises, the support, the I love yous, every single one was a lie. Elliot's eyes faltered, shame flashing like lightning before he shut them tight, jaw set in stone. I never lied about loving you, he murmured, low and raw. But I needed you to know what it felt like. Powerless. Shattered. Camille set her untouched tea down with trembling fingers. Her voice, razor thin, carried venom. Congratulations. You got what you wanted. Elliot winced at the acid in her tone. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the relentless tick of the kitchen clock, a reminder of seconds slipping by, wasted. This was never about revenge, Elliot rasped at last. What would you call it then? Camille shot back, sudden fire sparking in her eyes. She surged to her feet, unable to stand still. You crafted a trap, waited until I stepped into it, and ruined my career from halfway across the country. And now you stand here telling me this wasn't a game? His face crumpled under the weight of exhaustion. The anger that had fueled him evaporated, leaving him hollow. It didn't help, he admitted, voice splintering. I thought it would. But seeing you like this, God. He dragged both hands over his face, shaking. What have I done? A jagged laugh escaped her, sharp and joyless. Regret comes a little late, Elliot. Camille spun toward the doorway, desperate for air, for space, for escape. Camille, wait! His footsteps echoed behind her. She turned on him in the hallway, arm raised like a barrier. Don't, just don't. He froze, several paces back. The dogs hovered nervously at the edges of the room, ears pinned, sensing the storm thrumming in the air. Elliot opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to justify. She didn't care which. Do you know what hurts most? Camille's voice wavered, thinned by anguish. I was finally starting to forgive myself. I thought maybe, just maybe, you were forgiving me too. I thought we had a chance to start again. Her throat tightened, a sob clawing upward. She forced it back down. But you never wanted that, did you? You were just biding your time, waiting for the perfect moment to twist the knife. Tears blurred Elliot's eyes, panic overtaking the anger that had fueled him for so long. I was so angry, he choked. I couldn't see past it. I'm sorry, Camille. I went too far. She stared at him, disbelief and devastation tangled on her face. That's all you have? I went too far? Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut through walls. This isn't some lover's quarrel, Elliot. You lied to me. You strung me along. You demolished everything I worked for. Her words broke into a sob. For what? Some twisted sense of justice? Is that what you think I deserve? He bowed his head, shame swallowing him whole. No one deserves this, he whispered. I couldn't see past my own pain. Camille wiped her sleeve across her tear-streaked face, breaths ragged. I deserved your fury. I deserved you leaving me. Hell, I even deserved you screaming at me. Her hand swept the air as if the walls themselves bore witness to his betrayal. But this was calculated, heartless. Elliot stepped toward her cautiously, his voice barely audible. I know, and I can't undo it. No, she said softly, a terrifying calm settling over her. You can't. It's over. He reached for her instinctively, whether to beg or to cling to what little remained, she didn't care. She flinched backward so sharply she nearly lost her balance. Moose whimpered faintly, confused by the sudden movement. Don't touch me, Camille rasped, her voice scraped raw. Every inch of her felt flayed open. It's done, Elliot. The words landed between them like shards of glass. Elliot's eyes squeezed shut as though bracing for a blow. Silent tears streaked down his cheeks. Please, he whispered hoarsely, don't say that. I love you. His voice fractured, desperate. I thought, after everything, maybe we could find our way back. A bitter tremor cut through his throat. I was wrong. I ruined it all. But maybe... You hoped? Camille's laugh was disbelieving, hollow. Her head shook in disbelief. After you deliberately burned my entire life to the ground, you hoped we'd be fine. Her voice rose ragged, torn from her. How, Elliot? How could you possibly think that? He had no answer. He simply stood there, hollow, the silence screaming louder than anything he could have said. Camille forced down the ache clawing at her throat and moved past him toward the bedroom. She needed a bag. She needed distance. The air inside these walls was poison. Tonight, maybe forever. Elliot followed, tentative. Where are you going? He murmured. She froze in the doorway, back turned to him. Somewhere you're not, she said evenly. Her voice didn't waver. I can't even look at you, Elliot. Camille. His voice broke on her name, but he didn't stop her, didn't beg. He only stood there as she shut the door with finality. Inside the bedroom, Camille pressed her spine to the wood and slid down to the floor. The sobs tore out of her, shaking her entire body. She wept for what she thought they'd rebuilt. For the career in ashes. For the splintered pieces of herself and of Elliot left behind in this quiet war of betrayals. The rest of the day passed in silence. Separate rooms, no words. By morning, Camille was gone. On Elliot's nightstand sat her wedding ring, abandoned without a note. Chapter 8. Falling Facades. 3 weeks later, emptiness had hardened into routine. Camille and Elliot hadn't spoken since that night. Everything passed through lawyers now. Bank accounts divided, property reassigned, decisions about who kept the dogs. Moose and Dottie stayed with Elliot. Camille insisted. She refused to separate them, from each other or from him. The divorce crept forward quietly, brisk and businesslike, as if both of them were desperate for the finish line. Outside their private collapse, Camille's disgrace still echoed in the fashion world. Vogue's sterile statement citing editorial differences fooled no one. Within the industry's closed circle, Camille Langford's name had soured into shorthand for scandal. Magazines quietly blacklisted her, pending clarification on the fiasco. Even Marianne, her loyal agent, had gently suggested she vanish from sight until the whispers cooled. So Camille vanished. She slipped into a cramped sublet on the Lower East Side, abandoning the glittering penthouse and the life it represented to Elliot. She wanted nothing from it now. A damp, pale spring afternoon pulled her outside for the first time in weeks. It wasn't for pleasure, it was confrontation. In a quiet downtown cafe, Camille sat across from Nina Koski, the young Scandinavian photographer whose name had been dragged into the scandal alongside hers. Months earlier, Vogue had flown Nina to New York for arbitration, only for the meeting to collapse when Camille's shoot was canceled. Afterward, Camille had reached out, asking to meet in private. Now, holding a cooling mug of herbal tea, Camille felt the apology she'd rehearsed dissolve on her tongue. Across from her, Nina's watchful expression held both caution and understanding. "I'm sorry," Camille said finally, her voice low but firm. "Not for the first time, and probably not for the last. I didn't realize what was happening, but having your name tied to mine must have been hell. This entire mess has been hell, for everyone." Nina nodded, thoughtful. Her accent softened her words. "I was angry at first," she admitted quietly. "But I think I understand now. Something strange happened. You weren't trying to copy me. We were both—" She paused, searching. "Victims, maybe?" Camille's throat tightened. Victims, yes. Though one of them had also engineered the destruction. Elliot. She left his name unspoken, too raw, too close. They talked quietly for a while longer. When they stood to leave, Nina surprised her by reaching out and gently squeezing her hand. "This will fade," Nina said softly. "Scandals always do. You're very talented. Maybe when enough time passes we can work together, properly this time." A faint, tremulous smile touched Camille's lips. Tears pricked at the unexpected kindness. "I'd like that," she whispered. The meeting didn't fix everything, but it was a beginning. Still, Camille refused to let go, a fragile reminder that she hadn't been erased from existence entirely. Elliot, meanwhile, wandered through his days like a ghost adrift. Since Camille's departure, he oscillated violently between hollow regret and corrosive rationalizations. This was the outcome he had once craved. In his darkest hours, he had imagined her collapse, wished for it even, and now that wish had come true. Camille was shattered, and yet the victory tasted of ash, bitter and empty on his tongue. He continued showing up to the office, losing himself in work with a self-punishing intensity. The nights dragged longest. Long hours spent beneath fluorescent lights felt preferable to returning to the loft, where the silence amplified her absence until it roared. A new assignment absorbed him. A memorial installation commissioned for an abandoned industrial quarter. Once, it was the sort of concept he might have argued over with Camille, debating symbolism over wine and candlelight. Now he worked alone, frustration mounting with each discarded draft, never content with what stared back from the paper. Guilt clung to him like a shadow. When he closed his eyes, Camille's devastated face appeared, unyielding. More than once, he nearly surrendered to the urge to reach out, to apologize without pretense, without excuse. But what apology could bridge a wound so deep? "I destroyed you because you wounded me" was no absolution at all. The only sliver of comfort he allowed himself came in a single, selfish thought. She broke me first. She's not innocent either. For a time he clung to that bitter justification. But as the weeks slipped past and spring flowers appeared in the city planters, even that refrain faded. What remained was truth, stark and unrelenting, He had become something he swore he'd never be: cruel. One damp evening, long after nightfall, Elliot came home. The loft met him with a suffocating stillness. Moose and Dottie padded toward him, tails thumping softly against the floor, but even their joy felt subdued. They missed her. He could see it in the way they hovered near the doorway at every distant footstep, expecting her light tread, waiting in vain. He sank to the floor between them, fingers tangling in warm golden fur, and wept for the first time since she'd left. The dogs pressed against him, confused, but comforting in the quiet, uncomplicated way dogs know best. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words fracturing in his throat. He wasn't sure who he was speaking to, Camille, the dogs, or himself. In the following weeks, the fashion world's relentless gaze shifted toward fresher scandals. Camille Langford's downfall slipped from the headlines, though not entirely forgotten, still murmured about in tight circles as a faint, lingering stain. She remained tacitly barred from major commissions, her name an unspoken warning. So when a small upstate gallery invited her to showcase older work, intimate street photography, stripped of glamour but wholly hers, she accepted. It wasn't the triumphant return she had once dreamed of, but it was something. Packing framed prints into a rented car, Camille drove north alone, the steady hum of tires on asphalt her only companion. One evening, after hanging the last photograph, she stepped outside as dusk draped the quiet town in violet light. Across the street, a young couple strolled hand in hand, laughing over some private joke. The sight cut through her, sharp with memory, sharp with longing. Once she had known that effortless closeness. She wondered if Elliot ever felt the same hollow ache, or if anger still shielded him from missing her. In truth, Elliot's anger had burned itself out long ago. What lingered was emptiness, a hollow echo where Camille had been, where the man he once was had vanished, where the future they had imagined lay in ruins. The memorial project became his lifeline. Weekends found him at the derelict factory, overseeing welders and glassworkers as they shaped his vision. Under his relentless scrutiny, a spiraling structure took form, jagged planes of polished steel and glass twisting skyward, scattering fractured reflections of the crumbling landscape. It struck him suddenly. This wasn't merely an installation. It was a portrait of truth itself, fractured yet strangely beautiful. Or perhaps of them. When the sculpture was finally complete, the city hosted a modest unveiling. A small crowd assembled, critics, civic officials, a few curious locals. Elliot delivered a brief, measured speech about honesty and transparency in art. Applause followed. The piece was hailed as bold, evocative. He smiled, accepted their praise, hollow behind the expression. That night, after the crowd dispersed, Elliot remained. Alone, he stood before the gleaming spire as the sun bled into twilight. In one jagged panel, his reflection stared back. Rumpled suit, gaunt face, unrecognizable. And in that quiet moment, he finally let go. "Goodbye, Camille," he murmured. He didn't know if he was releasing her, or the version of himself who had loved her. Perhaps both. Chapter 9. Trial by Spotlight. 2 months later, on a brilliant summer morning, a quiet conference opened in New York. Its subject, ethics in photography. Hardly the sort of gathering that drew mainstream attention. The audience was mostly editors, artists, and academics, yet one detail set it apart. Camille Langford was scheduled to speak. The idea had been Marianne's, part calculated gamble, part act of faith. Camille hadn't agreed in the hope of reclaiming her career. She knew better than to believe in that fantasy. This was about something else entirely, salvaging her integrity. She needed to speak her truth, even if it meant standing exposed before strangers. In a modest uptown lecture hall, a small audience assembled. Backstage, Camille waited, palms damp despite the chill of the air conditioning. She arrived dressed simply, a plain black dress paired with unadorned flats, no shimmer, no statement pieces, nothing vying for attention. A staff member stepped forward, gently adjusting the microphone clipped to her collar. He murmured something meant to calm her nerves, a quiet reassurance punctuated by a fleeting smile before he retreated. The moderator took the stage first, reciting the introduction with crisp precision, a timeline of her achievements, the public scandal that shadowed them, and the theme of the evening, that precarious space where sincerity collides with craft. When Camille finally stepped out, the applause rose and fell like a subdued tide. She paused behind the podium, inhaled deliberately, and let her eyes travel over the faces before her. From the front row, Nina Koski caught her gaze and offered the barest nod, small, almost imperceptible, yet weighted with encouragement that felt heavier than any spoken word. "My name," Camille began, voice steady but quiet, "has been linked with deception, in my work and in my life." Her throat tightened. She hesitated. It was the first time she had voiced that truth aloud, and in public no less. Only a few people in the room, her agent, a couple of close friends who had known her and Elliot both, would fully grasp the depth of what she implied. But that wasn't the point. The point was that she needed to say it. "I want to tell you what truly happened during the Vogue shoot," she continued. "Not the technical side, the human side. I submitted a piece I believed was wholly my own, but it wasn't." The audience stirred, whispers, furrowed brows, startled glances. "Someone I trusted altered one of my images," Camille said. "They intentionally mirrored another artist's work, knowing it would invite accusations of plagiarism." The murmuring intensified, confusion rippling through the crowd. Camille's hands tightened against the podium, her knuckles whitening as she willed them not to tremble. "They did it for revenge," she said plainly. "Revenge for something profoundly personal, something I had done to them. I'm not here to name names or resurrect gossip. I'm here to acknowledge my own fault in all of it." Her tone softened. "I betrayed someone I loved in the most personal way, and in response they destroyed me, professionally." Silence fell over the room. Her eyes stung. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears spill too soon. "This isn't an excuse," she continued quietly. "Not for me, not for him. We both failed. We both let our partnership in life and in art collapse under betrayal and silence. And now, there's nothing left of it." A tear finally slipped down her cheek. She let it fall without shame. "All I can do now is tell the truth," she whispered, "to own my mistakes. I lost my hold on integrity, in my work, in my marriage, and I've paid the price. Heavily." The auditorium was hushed. Faces showed shock, sorrow, empathy. In the front row, Nina discreetly pressed a tissue to her damp eyes. Camille steadied herself, exhaling one more trembling breath. "I'm sorry," she said at last. "Sorry to my peers whose trust I fractured. Sorry to the young artists who once looked up to me and saw only scandal. Sorry to those I hurt, directly or from afar. I can't undo any of it, but I can share what I've learned. When integrity shatters, repairing it feels impossible, yet every attempt to rebuild it matters." When she stepped back from the podium, the applause rose hesitantly, soft, almost fragile at first, then grew fuller, honest, respectful, not triumphant, but real. Something eased in Camille's chest. Whatever judgments awaited her in the industry, she had finally said what needed saying. She had told the truth. In the dim shadows backstage, unseen by her, Elliot had been standing the entire time. He had slipped quietly into the back of the hall, unsure why he had come, unsure if he even belonged there, only knowing he had to hear her speak. And her words struck him. She could have condemned him. She didn't. Instead, she acknowledged her own share of the wreckage, even offered him, impossibly, a sliver of grace. His vision blurred. He blinked hard as he listened to her confession, humbled by the courage it took to say it all aloud. As the applause swelled and Camille gave a small bow of gratitude, Elliot turned and left unnoticed. This moment belonged to her, not to him. Outside, daylight greeted him in a rush, bright and overwhelming. He drew a sharp breath, warmth spilling across his face. Something inside him, a knot that had been wound tight since that night, began to loosen, unraveling thread by thread. Into the open air, barely louder than a breath, he whispered, "I'm sorry too, Camille." And though irrational, he hoped the wind might somehow carry the words to her. Months later, their paths parted, separate lives, quieter and humbler. Different roads, but ones they could finally claim as their own. Camille never regained the standing she once held in the upper tiers of fashion. Yet, over the years, she stumbled into a quieter, more forgiving corner of the art scene, one where her name no longer carried whispers of scandal or past glory. Small community galleries and modest artist collectives began to welcome her raw, unpolished photographs. With little more than a battered suitcase and a collection of candid images, she wandered from city to city, documenting fleeting slices of ordinary life, vendors squabbling over the price of fruit, children shrieking with delight beneath a spray of water from a busted hydrant, lovers leaning into each other on splintered park benches. It was a far cry from the flawless sheen of her Vogue years. But this work, this life, felt genuine. Critics, though restrained in their praise, acknowledged the transformation in Camille Langford's later career. They often remarked on the disarming honesty in her new photographs, a quiet intimacy absent from her earlier, polished portfolios. One brisk autumn afternoon in Chicago, Camille found herself standing inside a small gallery where her latest series had been hung. The room was nearly empty. Only a few visitors whispered softly as they examined her portraits. Standing off to the side, unrecognized, she regarded her work in silence. There was a rare calm in being invisible. Her art no longer begged for attention. She no longer hungered for it. On one wall hung a photograph titled, "Grace in Small Things, 2025, two weathered hands trading a single flower at a farmer's market. Camille's lips curved in a soft, bittersweet smile. She had finally learned to cherish exactly that. The small things, modest spaces, quiet victories, fleeting, fragile truths. Meanwhile, in New York, Eliot's career as an architect had continued its steady ascent, though far from the dazzle of high-profile acclaim. He pursued work rooted in humility and human connection rather than ego. Community centers, public gathering spaces, structures meant to be lived in and touched, not just admired in glossy magazines. His colleagues observed a subtle shift in his designs, an empathy woven into the way he shaped light and space. He had abandoned the penthouse lifestyle, choosing instead a sparse loft uptown, its exposed brick and open light better suited to the pair of dogs who spent their days sprawled in warm sun patches while Eliot worked late at his drafting table. Sometimes, in the stillness of those long nights, his eyes would wander to the empty chair across from him, the one Camille used to occupy, leafing through lookbooks or quietly editing photos. The piercing ache of her absence had dulled over time, settling into something quieter, less sharp, a muted longing rather than an open wound. Among Eliot's most personal creations was a memorial he had erected in the city's abandoned factory district, a tribute to authenticity. The structure rose stark and imposing, fashioned from fractured steel panels that mirrored the world around them by day and emitted a soft glow by night. Passers-by often paused there, caught between intrigue and unease, compelled to confront their own reflections. This was exactly the response Eliot had hoped for. One late evening, he visited the monument alone. The streets were hushed, thick with the scent of approaching rain. As his fingers brushed against the cold metal, he caught fleeting, broken reflections of himself, mingled with fragments of the city. The monument held both his story and hers, though no one else knew it. It honored truth, but also the heavy cost of ignoring it. Earlier that same day, not far away, a temporary photography exhibit had concluded its final showing inside a converted warehouse. The series featured stark black-and-white portraits by an artist named C. Langford and had quietly drawn a steady stream of curious locals during its brief 2-week run. By coincidence, Camille's exhibit closed just before Eliot arrived at his own installation. Their paths never crossed, yet a trace of her lingered. As Eliot turned to leave, he noticed a faded poster clinging to the warehouse wall, its edges lifting in the wind. The image showed a young couple laughing in the rain. Across the bottom, bold letters read, Camille Langford, unfiltered. Elliot stepped closer, smoothing the curling paper with his hand. The joy etched in those photographed faces was unmistakable. It stirred memories of another time when he and Camille had laughed like that themselves. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the memory wash over him. Camille barefoot on their rooftop during a summer downpour, golden retrievers bounding at her heels, both of them drenched, both radiant, unburdened, alive. When he opened his eyes, the street was empty. The monument beside him stood silent. In the distance, thunder rumbled, promising rain. He gave the poster one last gentle touch before walking away. For a brief moment, his reflection fractured across the steel panels of his memorial, splintered and multiplied in the mirrored surface. In a city of millions, Camille and Elliot moved forward along separate paths. They no longer spoke. There were no more words to give. And yet, in quiet and invisible ways, they remained bound. Her photographs, stripped of glamour, whispered the lessons he had forced them both to face. His buildings, sculpted from glass and steel, carried those same truths. The bond between them had broken, but in its absence, both had found room to create anew. Camille, through her lens, learned to devote herself to sincerity. Elliot, through his architecture, pursued devotion to truth. In this way, they found a fragile form of atonement, apart, yet forever shaped by what they had lost, and unexpectedly, by what they had salvaged from the ruins.